Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this podcast. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. Benjamin Franklin. Our guest today, founder, entrepreneur, quick study, mentor to many in the moving space, the moving industry, the it's a culture building industry. We'll talk about as a recipient of that great service in the last 2 years. Um, Founder of owner, an operator, and an entrepreneur of Two College Brothers Moving and Storage. Founder of Home, or author of Hometown Titan, an awesome book that I've been listening to on Audible, and the co-founder of the Titan Retreats, Wade Swikle. Thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to get into your entrepreneurial journey and some of the amazing things that you're doing in the moving industry. And thanks for being the first guest in that space. This is episode 965 or something like that at this point. So thanks so much for coming on the show, and shout out to our regular friend on the Culture Matters podcast, Reagan Weiss, for putting us together. We love you, Reagan. Thanks for coming on, Wade.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jay. I'm honored to be here. And also thank you to Reagan. That's our mutual contact who connected us and excited to dive into it. I've been listening to your podcast and love what you're doing.
Nice. Actually, I want to ask you because when you went to college, you originally studied broadcast journalism. Is that correct? So you had an interest in media and promotion. And we will talk about your podcast. You have a great podcast the listeners should subscribe to. But where did that come from? And what connection do you think that has to what you're doing today, influencing so many of these mover entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, when I started out in college, I'd always been interested in TV and radio. I was on all the school news stations when I was,
Ah,
going up through elementary, middle, and high school. So loved the whole TV production side of things. And I'm kind of a radio nerd. I still listen to both FM and AM radio,
wow.
and podcasts, and I enjoy talk shows. So. Yeah, when I went off to college, I decided I wanted to try to get into that space and get into communications. Telecommunications is what I studied for undergrad.
Hmm.
But I've also always had a passion for entrepreneurship. And about halfway through that program, I had tested into the telecommunications broadcast journalism track at the University of Florida, and they only took like a third of the applicants to it that started junior year. And I studied all summer trying to get the voice down, trying to, learn everything I needed to know about how to write scripts for TV,
Oh,
and got in. And first day of class, they said, well, okay, thank you for all coming into this and studying hard and working hard to get here. But if you want to basically make $14,000 a year and live in the middle of nowhere for the first 5 years of your career and then maybe get a shot in a bigger market, then this is the job for you. And I was like, why didn't they tell us this before we did all that work to get here?
wow.
So, I stuck it out, finished that program up, learned a ton about how the media world works, really did enjoy it. But I always had this passion for entrepreneurship just from a young age, starting, different side hustles and projects and trying to figure out how to make money. And that's ultimately what led me to the moving business. And I think I learned a lot of the things I learned. You kind of learn a little bit about everything when you're in TV and radio. And I learned how to learn, and I learned how to
Oh,
communicate. And I mean, overall, it was part of the journalism and communications school at Florida. So I still use a lot of those practices to this day, just in correspondence and communicating with people. Getting public relations and media appearances and things like that. So it's you know a little bit farther away being in the moving industry than that space, but overall it's been good. It's been good. And I still
hmm.
get to scratch that itch with my Grow Your Moving Company podcast.
When the learning how to, in the spirit of learning how to learn or thoughtfulness, what's your, is there a connection with quality moving experience and attention to detail, thoughtfulness?
Oh
That's
yeah.
something that arises as like you're going into a foreign culture, a foreign environment.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
could
it's a
step
different
the
job
wrong
site
way.
every
Yeah.
day. We interact with a lot of people, and I mean, honestly, I think having good communication skills in the moving business, really any home service business, is one of the most important things that an entrepreneur can have, or even just somebody who works in that space, because we have different customers every single day. It's not just one client that we work with, or a handful of clients that we work with. It's usually in residential, it's a new person every single day that we're servicing. Sometimes it's multiple people, families. And then we have the employee side, which is a lot of different backgrounds that come into to the space to work. People from service and hospitality, people from other home services and more blue collar work. Sometimes, we have younger people that are just getting out of school, or older people. I mean, all different ages, races, all different cultures, which is why I love what you're doing so much, because
Thanks.
it really is probably what separates most moving company owners that are good from the ones that seem to struggle to make it by. I always say it's a low barrier to entry, but it's a high barrier to success. And communication and culture are some of the most important things to get to that
Do you
success.
remember your first job?
So yeah, actually I do. When I was in college, I came home for the summer, after my freshman year, and needed to work. And it was during the middle of the recession, 2009, I think. And I was having trouble. I applied to like probably 30 places, and I wasn't getting a lot of calls back. So I just started posting ads on Craigslist, branding myself as a college athlete looking to help people move. I played baseball at the time, and people liked that. So I spent that whole summer just kind of creating my own schedule, going out working for cash jobs, helping people load and unload U-Haul trucks. And yeah, I think the very first job I ever worked, it was a older couple that we were loading up their U-Haul and moving it down to. I grew up in Venice. I think we moved them from Venice or Sarasota down to Port Charlotte. I think you're
Wow.
familiar with the Gulf Coast of Florida. So
Yeah.
yeah, they bought me lunch. They told me stories about their youth, and we bonded. And I was like, this isn't so bad. I could see myself doing this in an industry that I think, most kids don't go to college, let alone even grow up or think about getting into at that age. So yeah, it was it
Wow.
was it was fun. It was a fun summer.
What are some of the um, obstacles in moving, like from the consumer side?
Yeah.
Like, because it's an ink. I'd be curious, in all the people you've engaged with and met and customers served, what are some of the stresses that people go through when they're in that process of moving, or they're thinking about moving?
Yeah, so I mean, people move for a variety of reasons. I mean, we've moved over 20,000 people since I've been doing this,
Wow.
and we've seen pretty much every situation, every life event that you can imagine. You have everything from people who are excited because they're moving into their first home, or they just bought, a new home that is their dream home, and then you have it all the way down the ladder to people getting evicted and going through a very traumatic time, death, divorce, uh, families, coming together, getting married, having kids, or breaking up, or taking a new job somewhere. I mean, there's all kinds of different reasons people move. They say it's the third most stressful time in a person's life behind death and divorce.
Really?
Yeah, so sometimes it brings out the worst in people, and we have to come in prepared to handle a variety of personality types that handle stress in different ways. And our goal is to not be the stressful part of that. They're hiring us to try to make it less stressful. And unfortunately, in our industry, it kind of gets a bad rap because there's a lot of players that over the years have you've seen it as an opportunity to take advantage of people when they're desperate, or when they, need to get something done that they can't do themselves. And I just think that that's, the wrong way to go about it. It's important to try to put yourself in their shoes. For us, it's something we do every day, multiple times a day. But for them, it's something that they only do once every 3 to 7 years on average. So, that's yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of different personalities, a lot of different situations, and it's you just got to be prepared to handle it all.
How would you advise our listeners that are interviewing for that right organization to partner with in this? in this transition?
Like when
Their
somebody
transition.
is
I'm a
interviewing movers.
consumer. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm interviewing movers. What types of questions should I be asking, or how even what paradigm should I be looking through that? How much attention to detail should I take?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've honestly been thinking about writing an entire book about how the moving industry works from an insider's
Oh,
perspective, but we've got
love
several
that.
documents on like questions to ask. So the moving industry is, I'll be honest, pretty far behind most other service industries. Just since I've been in it, we've had softwares come about. When I first started, there weren't really any good softwares. Now it's rapidly growing in that space for vendors that help moving company owners operate more efficiently. But I think it's important that the movers today and the movers that come to our events and that I work with and mentor or get mentorship from are a different breed than movers from probably your parents' past or grandparents' past. There are, there's van lines and then there's independent movers. And I
Hmm.
mostly surround myself with independent movers. And it seems like from like 2008 to 2012, most of the good moving company owners popped up. And I mean, there's been some that have popped up since then. But it just seems like that's kind of like the growth mindset, growth oriented, people who want to do business the right way started a lot of them between 2008 2012 and then since then because historically it's been dominated by the van lines and that was something that came about around 1935 when the government basically only handed out a small number of moving licenses because the industry wasn't regulated at all and more people were uh, moving to cities and suburbs from rural areas, and the need for from consumers became a lot more apparent. And there was a handful of companies that dominated that market until about 1980 when they, in a sense, deregulated it, which has had its pros and cons when they did that because it was able to make the price of moving a lot more competitive because you had an emergence of competitors come in. But there was a lot of business practices that had been going on for, almost 50 years that weren't really the best for the consumer. And a lot of companies, unfortunately, that have been around, since those days still operate that way. And it's a lot of like the van line style of businesses that I think, have perpetuated a little bit of that stigma that probably still exists today. But as far as questions to ask
What's a
movers,
van line?
so a van line, I don't want to like say any names, but it's one of these companies that has the tractor trailers that you might see driving down the interstate. There's independents that have tractors too, but one of the big national brands. They've got agencies all over the country. Typically, how that works, they'll get corporate agreements, military, government contracts, or people will just hire them for large interstate moves, sometimes local, sometimes commercial, but they have hubs all around the country, and a lot of times they will have a owner operator that reports to an agent, and then the owner operator is responsible for hiring labor, so it could be different labor in every city. And then the agents are all different in every city, and they all operate under this umbrella, this conglomerate that's called a van line. And logistically speaking, the model makes sense. But for the consumer, it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore with a lot of the technology and the practices that modern day movers are employing because your items are you're getting basically passed from a helper to an owner operator to an agent to the van line to another agent to another owner operator to another helper and things that's where you hear about a lot of these things getting lost in storage in some city and 3 to 4 weeks or more before items get delivered and claims and all these different runarounds that you get with the communications, whereas most independent companies will handle the entire move by themselves, with their people, with their employees. And that's how we operate. And I think that that's a better consumer model. And the van lines, they've just operated that way for over 100 years. And there's this new wave that has come up over the last 15 years since I've been involved in the industry that is really changing the game. But unfortunately, government is still lobbied by a lot of those practices, a lot of those van lines and agencies. and they haven't really kept up with a lot of the technology to modernize how consumers can interact with moving companies and get things done more efficiently. So there's a lot of kind of competing cultures, if you will,
Oh.
especially for the purposes of your podcast.
Well, I want to unpack that because if I'm moving, I'd like my stuff that day.
Yeah.
If it's close, like within driving distance, is that a pipe dream for most, or is that possible for many if they're thinking about this in a proactive uh, uh, context of how they're interviewing for a moving partner? Like, I want to make sure I don't want to wait weeks to be able to get my stuff. That would I think that would make it even more. That might move it up the list. You said it was the third most terrible, it might be
Stressful, yeah. Yeah,
stressful
not
thing. Yeah,
necessarily
that
terrible, but third, just moving in general, whether you do it yourself or hire somebody, it's typically the third most stressful time for a lot of reasons. You know, you're having to switch utilities, your addresses, you're having
yep,
to
yep.
acclimate to a new climate that's uncomfortable. You know, change is uncomfortable, growth is uncomfortable, whether it's for better or for worse. Yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question? The original question there. Sometimes.
I should actually say this too, because you wouldn't know this, but and the audience should know this. I'm a testimonial for your teachings because one of your students, I believe, moved us last year, and they did such an amazing job. Even thing like how they responded to the inevitable adversities that arise when you're moving from one place to the next. So just from a testimony like me, because we're going to talk about this community, you teach movers as well, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's the moving Titan retreats and the Tighten Up training program that we recently launched. And I think your original question, I just thought of it, was can you get your stuff same day when it's local? And the answer is yes. Yeah, when it's a local move, that's typically going to happen, no matter who you hire. Usually, if it's a reputable company, it's the interstate moves with the van line networks that can take a period of time.
But like the
But yeah,
average
going.
consumer might not be able to know the difference between the two. So I guess that brings us, yeah, like what questions should people ask, or what best practices would you say from a consumer? I would love to read that book when you have it of how to look at it from a consumer standpoint. But what advice do you have for our listeners that are in the process of moving or will be, they're moving up. Their company, they sold their business and now they want to move into a bigger house.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of what we teach in the Titan retreats and our Tighten Up training program online. But it's find out what's their reputation. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Typically finding somebody through word of mouth that you trust. Sometimes it's your real estate agent, sometimes it's your neighbor, coworker, family member, whoever is somebody in your life that you trust. I always tell people to start there when you're looking for a good mover. It's kind of like finding a good mechanic or a good chiropractor. You know, you kind of go by a lot of word of mouth because that's how the good companies grow. Is they turn every move into multiple moves through
Mm.
referrals. So I would suggest with that, but do your research online. There used to be the yellow pages, and that's how most moving companies used to get new business if it wasn't through a referral. The problem with the yellow pages is that nobody can go on the yellow pages and leave a review, or at least not how it used to be with the phone books. And so the biggest moving company that could afford the multi-page spread tended to get bigger because they would just draw more attention, more phone calls, and then they didn't really care how they did the job. You know, they would just go in, knock it out. Every job that came from there was a transaction. Now we have the internet, and the internet has totally changed how to research and find reputable moving companies because there's a lot of different websites. You can usually go to a website and get a pretty good feel for how put together a mover is if they've got stock images on their website of movers that aren't wearing a uniform or trucks that aren't branded. That's a big red flag. You want to find a company that has images on their website of their guys, their trucks, something that has a unique brand to it, because another thing that a lot of pop-up companies might do is they'll go download some template or get some stock images and just throw up a site that looks pretty good. But there's
Mm,
little things, they usually have an about me section. You can hear the story. You can actually see who the owner is. If you don't know who owns the company, then it may be one of those rogue players. Google reviews are great. There are other moving specific review platforms that you can go to. And now it's changing even more with like Chat GPT and AI LLM search engines, which are doing a pretty good job of aggregating all the reviews from all the different sources and kind of vetting the companies to find the best movers. And uh, any mover, that doesn't see that coming needs to adjust their strategy accordingly because, 10 years ago, I mean, even shorter time frame than that, Google was the way to go. Before that it was the yellow pages, and then you had like classified sections in Craigslist, and then Google became kind of the dominant force, and now it's trending towards AI, especially with the younger population, as far as like internet research can go, and it does a pretty good job of helping to identify top companies. So I
mm.
would say, from a high level perspective, and I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to vet your movers and to interview them. But those are some kind of, key things to look out for. Another thing is, price. I think a lot of people view movers as a commodity, and the good moving companies carry more costs. They've got an actual team helping to manage and facilitate the move. They've got W-2 uniformed, trained employees. They invest in training for their team. They invest in culture. They've got all the insurance. A lot of moving company owners will hire independent contractors slash day laborers. And
Yeah,
you want to definitely
yeah.
make sure that your company is hiring a W-2 employee and that they have workers' comp insurance in case somebody gets hurt on your property. And that they have, all of the limits that they need, and they have all the licensing that they need, so they don't get stuck with somebody who, just got picked up at a, Home Depot parking lot that morning to go and protect your priceless china cabinet.
That from the entrepreneurs that are listening to the show, I think this is be very helpful. You, you bought two college brothers in 2013 after you finished your MBA in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so well, had started. I originally kind of started, solo as kind of just a freelance mover, if you will, and then I started
While in
Smarter.
college.
Yeah, while I was in college, that was that summer, kind of thing that I started off with, summer gig, if you will. And then I started right as I started graduated my undergrad and got into the entrepreneurship program. I started Smarter Moving Solutions LLC, which to this day is still our LLC for two college brothers. But we had competed against another student-run moving company at the time called Two College Brothers, and my brother worked for
Huh.
me. My fraternity brother worked for me. So when they reached out around
Oh, cool.
2013, looking to go off and do other things, they saw me as their top competitor and invited me to take a look at their company, and I ended up purchasing it with. The very little money that I could scrape up at the time, and decided to pursue that brand because they had been around a little bit longer than I had. They were getting some more leads, and I thought the branding was sticky. I had, my brother still worked for me. My fraternity brother was my first manager that I had ever hired, and slash mover on the trucks
Wow.
with me. So decided to fully embrace that brand, and that was about 12 years ago that we acquired them and went full steam with the Two College Brothers branding.
Door, what, if anything at all, did being a part of a fraternal community in college help or translate to building your camaraderie and your culture in with your business, with your company?
Yeah, I mean, it really came down to connections. We had a really tight knit house of guys that were all, clean cut, educated college students, and they were my first movers. And it allowed
Oh,
me to
wow.
tap into this labor pool that had a just a more energetic, polished culture than I think a lot of our competitors did at the time. And then, to this day, it's still I'm getting value out of it because we're moving a lot of the people that I went to school with, or they're referring us, or they're introducing us to
Hmm.
referral partners that we can build relationships with. So I think it really came down to, getting around a room of ambitious people that in the beginning helped me just take on the jobs and establish some school-wide connections for potential clientele when the students moved. To now, it's moving them when they are moving into their second and third homes, having kids, starting families, establishing their own careers that they can help us make connections with their connections. So I
Hmm.
think the networking piece of it is probably the biggest advantage to that fraternity.
Did your fraternity have core values or
We
a mantra that it
did.
lived by?
Yeah, we had quite a few during the pledge process that we had to memorize. Unfortunately, I haven't been brushing up on it over the last 15 years, but I don't remember specifically what they all were. But there was definitely a culture kind of ingrained on us back then. Since then, I've kind of put a lot of thought into establishing my own core values, both for living my life, but also for operating the company.
I believe one of the core values for Two Brothers was about ownership. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Own your role, or what was it?
Yeah, yeah. So our four values are be honest, own it, hone it, and hustle. And I mean, in a business that revolves around trust, honesty obviously reigns supreme. And then be honest, own it, ownership, taking ownership in everything you do, whether it's just the task that you're assigned for the day, whether it's the role that you're currently in. Um, you know, Being an entrepreneur, I'm big on business ownership, of course, and that carries into some of the other B2B training things that we do with our conferences and our online program. And then honing it is honing your skills. I mean, I'm a big reader of business books, personal development books, podcasts, audiobooks, YouTube, you name it. Courses. I still will take online courses through school to this day on things that I'm interested in or things that I can
Oh
help me
yeah.
with. And then be honest on hone and hustle, just working hard. In the beginning, I had to knock a lot of doors, and honestly, to this day, I still knock doors. Whether it's my neighbors when I see a for sale sign go up, or
Wow.
it's another business that we're looking to partner with on something. So just working, being the hardest working person in the room and the hardest working company in the area.
Are you an early to bed, early to rise, or are you an insomniac? How does that? What strategy? What works for you?
Yeah, I try to be. I This morning my alarm went off at 4:45, and I was at the
Nice.
office around 6:45. So, I think I get my best, most creative work done early in the morning before the rest of the world wakes up. Kind of depends what season I'm in. If there's a project I'm working on or a business that I'm really pushing to develop, or if I've got a deadline for a bid or something looming that I need that me time, where I can think freely without my phone going off or meetings that kind of interrupt my flow when I need to get into that flow state. I mean, obviously, sleep is an incredibly important thing to get just for clarity and health. So, if I happen to be up late, either working on something, going to an event, or just spending time with friends or family, sometimes the early morning routine goes out the window because I know I need to prioritize that sleep so that it doesn't ruin the rest of my day. So it really depends,
Mhm.
but during the week, yeah, I'd say early mornings are where I do my best.
In those first 3 years, like, well, I guess so 13, you acquire because you were approached by a competitor, so that was like a level up. So 11, you're in it, working your smart move. Like from 11 to 14, what were those work weeks like? Did you have anything going on other than that, or is it just absolute focus and intensity? Because many of our entrepreneurs are just starting, or they're in that first few years of their business, or maybe they have a corporate career and they want their side passion to replace it. So I'm curious,
Mhm.
how much effort and intensity did you have to put in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it was really all I could think about. I was still finishing school, and then I got the
Oh,
graduate
wow.
degree from the business school in
Wow.
entrepreneurship. So I had to, allocate some time and attention towards that. And of course, college has the social aspect to it too. But I remember my first employee slash manager, one of my fraternity brothers. would get frustrated with me because we'd be, at the local college pub having a drink after a long job, and I'd just be talking about the next idea. What if we did this? What if we did that? So it was, I mean, it
Wow.
became a lifestyle pretty quickly when I started, and it was, I'd be sitting in class like drawing designs for my next advertisement, or I tried to get in my entrepreneurship program, and even in my undergrad, I tried to have my school projects revolve around my business in some capacity, whether that was, writing a business plan or a marketing pitch, or, doing a case study, or, whatever the case was. If there was a thesis to it, like it all kind of revolved around my business
Mhm.
so that I could do, both at the same time and be mutual beneficial. So yeah, I mean, those early days was a grind for sure. I spent a lot of time on the trucks actually moving as well. And I'm
Oh,
proud to
really?
say that I've pretty much,
Yeah.
I mean, I think worked every single role in my company today. And I think that's important to understand every single role. Not that you have to stay in it forever, and not, maybe it's not even your strong suit, but it is important to at least be familiar with it so that you know how to hire for it and you know how to train somebody for it, or at least, once you start to get to a higher level where you can afford to hire more talent, you know what to look for to find somebody smarter than you in that specific category. Just kind of going back to learning how to learn and learning how to know a little bit about a lot of things.
Hmm.
I think it's important that you at least know how to do it in case you ever have to go back into it, or know how to at least find the right people to align with for that specific role. But yeah, I mean, the early days was just a lot of being on the trucks, answering calls in the middle of a job, trying to book the next one, and then having to put it down and carry a piece of furniture down the stairs. So it was a lot back then, and I'm fortunate enough at this point to have a lot of those roles delegated. But every now and then, I still try to jump back into them just to stay sharp and keep up with a lot of the best practices for the industry and embrace new technologies and that sort of a thing.
What's it like being um so deeply in the hero's journey of founder to CEO in your early 30s, you're a early to mid 30s. Um, because when I would think those in your cohort maybe they did a corporate career right after, and like they're climbing that ladder, and like they're starting to have some degree of success, a small percentage, or others are that maybe they're leaving corporate, and they're at the beginning of where you were in your early 20s, because they're leaving. Because you I'm curious, and was did the fact because I have a 15-year reunion coming up too myself, and I'm thinking like this is gonna be interesting to see where everyone is at. And um, what's that like to because you've had your company, you bought that company in 2013, it's 2025. That's a substantial period of time. It's very successful. You have multiple endeavors. Um, you're not alone in
Yeah,
that. Many listeners are there. They might be in Indonesia or something like that, but or maybe not in Indonesia, but I don't want to offend the Indonesians.
you never
The
know.
Canadians listening to this in that space, but to be young and so far into the hero's journey of entrepreneur, how do you did that have any so how do you burden that, and then did that have any influence in starting this? And you have a huge community of contemporaries, competitors, contemporaries, movers.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to ultimately leveraging whatever position that you're in and what stage and what season you're in. I mean, I just turned 35 last week, so I'm not
Well,
so
happy
young
birthday.
anymore. Obviously,
Yeah.
not the college brother that I started out as, but when I was, in my 20s, I was able to leverage my youth because people liked the idea of hiring, a young, ambitious person. And I think a lot of times when you're younger, some more doors can open if you kind of leverage that correctly and you find people that either you remind them of at a younger age, or they just respect that young ambition. I used to hate the word millennial because I always thought that they got a bad rap. People said lazy millennials, now it's lazy Gen Zers. So I guess that like always is going to be,
It's one of the
whatever.
excerpts in 30 Days of Thaws. There's no such thing as a millennial. We share that. It's just funny. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
And,
just
so I think back then it was helpful, but but it also kind of held me back a little too, because I'd walk into, some bayfront mansion that, was a multi-million-dollar home, and the youth may have came off as inexperienced to somebody who was more
Oh yeah.
established that had nicer things. Now that I'm getting a little bit older, I've started to get a couple gray hairs, and people might tell me that, I say, I notice a gray hair there on your beard. I'm like, well, hey, it's good for business. So I'm not complaining, because it shows, a little bit more experience, I think. So, whether you're old or young, there's always kind of like an angle that you can get. I think you
What
can get
about
people
peer
to,
group?
yeah, with our peer group, I mean, it's kind of across the board. I've kind of grown up with a lot of the movers that come to our events and that I seek for mentorship or sometimes even mentor. A lot of them were, in their 20s or early 30s when they were starting out. Some of them, most of them are older. I am still, tend to be younger, at least on the level of business that I'm currently at now. But you still
Yeah.
see young guys coming into the game all the time in their 20s, or sometimes doing something similar to what I did at a very, early 20s, or still in school maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think historically before that, like 2008 era kind of kicked things off after the recession. There it was kind of a good old boys network. It was a lot of older people that were second or third generation in the business. They were kind of aging out at the time, and I think it kind of presented an opportunity for this younger generation who embraced the internet and technology, to get a little bit of a leg up there. And we've all kind of, I feel like, grown up together to an extent. And now, like, the guys that are just getting started in their 20s in this business, I think are going to have a huge advantage, because when I was starting out, none of the resources that we've created, or that people that
Mm.
have been spinoffs or that are in my circle are creating and have created, really existed. I didn't There wasn't like a blueprint. There wasn't like a moving consultant that we could go to get advice from. People didn't really want to talk to other, moving companies for fear of
Mm.
competition. There wasn't technology, there weren't CRMs, there wasn't AI. The internet was pretty easy to manipulate back then with reviews and algorithms and things like that. And it's gotten a lot more advanced since then. And after probably around 2017, is where some things started to click, and I was able to make some connections. And that's actually how I started my own podcast, the
Wow.
Grow Your Moving Company podcast, because I was picking up the phone and just calling moving company owners in other markets that looked like they were successful, and just
Right.
asking advice. How do we market? How do we hire? What do we charge? What's the best way to do this or that, or how to buy a truck? And I was fortunate enough to get some people to actually answer the call and give me some advice. And I was like, man, like, nothing like this exists. There's no podcasts. There's not really any conferences that are, where people are willing to open up on this stuff. And so I was like, I'm going to start a podcast, because there's got to be other people that could use this information that are in my position. And that's really how my podcast started back in 2017, and then kind of led to our Moving Titan retreats and our Tighten Up training program, and built a following around that. So, and now, like, there's other people starting those types of things that may have been inspired by some of those early.
If we have listeners that maybe they're in an executive career, could they buy a franchise or invest into your and start? They want to start a moving company. Is that something you offer? If
Yeah,
they if they
absolutely.
if they're in a career, because there's two different avatars or there's like multiple. I'm thinking if I'm the mover that I'm stuck at a certain level where I'm just like picking things up, my back hurts. I might be able to learn from you clearly, or maybe I'm uh, larger, but I'm still using those day laborers that don't yet have uniforms. I'm not sure, quite sure how to reinvest back in the business and make it a brand and make it more successful. They could learn from you too. But then I'm thinking there's people that may be in like a corporate career that want to start a moving company. So just on that branch for a second, is it a viable business model long term for someone that would be doing a career change? And then why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the moving industry isn't going anywhere anytime soon. People are going to always be moving. Now, it may evolve. We might be replacing certain roles with AI, or, I think we're a ways away from replacing roles with robots, for the physical piece of it. Uh,
Yeah, that'd be
but I think
exciting.
it's going to happen eventually. I think we'll
Yeah.
have self-driving trucks, and I think we'll be having self-driving robots. But as far, we do have a franchise model, and all of my current franchisees have come through podcasts and the events that we host that I connected with. I'm very selective on who represents our brand under the franchise model, because there are other moving franchises and just franchises in general that they just want to sell them as quick as they can, get that franchise fee and start collecting royalties. And it's this industry is it takes a special type of person to do well in it, because again, you have to have those communication and leadership skills. And with the franchise model, it takes an even more special type of person, because they have to be willing to operate under somebody else's playbook. Whereas a lot of entrepreneurs like to write their own playbook. But for somebody who doesn't want to try to reinvent the wheel, the franchise model can make a lot of sense. But if you want to do your own thing and have your own brand, and build your own legacy and your own name, that's where like our conferences with the Titan retreats and our training that we offer, and the mentorship that we offer comes into play, because that's where we kind of get a collaborative approach and share new ideas. And I learn just as much as the people who attend those events learn. So I think there's pros and cons. It depends
Wow.
on your personality type, your risk tolerance, how much you want like done for you versus how much you want to kind of do yourself and recreate. But at the end of the day, it's all about just, a lot of the same principles are involved, and that's, certain systems and processes and cultural, standards and advancements that need to all kind of work together, and different skill sets that need to work together to be successful, whether you go the franchise route or the independent route. I want to learn from everybody, and I also want to work with everybody in some capacity. And I think, that abundance mindset is how we can all grow and how we can all win, versus, from years past, that closed-minded, scarcity mindset of wanting to keep your cards close to your chest. I mean, I'm an open book, and I want to share my secrets and resources with somebody else, because I know that they might share things with me. And it just happened today. Somebody sent me an SOP for a school move vendor, process to get in with schools. And I said, hey, I can help you with the public relations side for when you're
Hmm.
doing these types of community things. So, it just works symbiotically. And I truly think that you get the most growth when you keep that open mind, and you're willing to not only, seek that mentorship, but also give that mentorship in return. I always say, you should spend 30% of your time hanging out with people above you, 30% of your time hanging out with people on your level that you can push and grow with, and then 30% of your time hanging out, and mentoring people below you, and then 10% of your time to yourself. It's important to reflect and to have that thinking time that we talked about earlier, and uh, kind of learn how to read between the lines and take a little bit from each level, and be able to apply it to yourself and your life and your business.
Yeah, your parents were teachers, guidance
Yes.
counselors, both.
Yeah. Yep. They were both in the education system. Depending on
Wow.
what point in their career, they were teachers and guidance counselors. And they had
What
tried their hand.
subjects?
What's that?
What subjects did they teach?
So my mom taught English, French, Spanish.
Wow,
Those were kind of like her
that's cool.
primaries, depending on what grade she was
That's
teaching
cool.
at the time. I think she did a little bit in elementary. That was just kind of general, but yeah, she was more, in the classroom, but she was also a guidance counselor. My dad worked with adult education. He used to administer GED tests. I
Wow,
remember like once a month, he'd
that's
go
cool.
visit prisons and administered GED tests in
Whoa,
prisons. And then he became a guidance
that's
counselor. He actually, he was my high school guidance counselor when I was in high school, which had its pros and cons. Couldn't get away with much, but
oh,
it was,
that's yeah.
nice to have him there. So
Did he ever share anything he learned, thought, or philosophically around the being in going to the prisoners and helping them take the general education degree, the GED? Like anything you guys ever talk about, you ever share anything about? Because some of our listeners might think you know, have whatever bias they have to people that are, been in the system. They're dumb or they're uneducated. They can't be educated. Did you ever share anything, or you have anything you could share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, between prisoners and just being in the schools, you deal with at-risk youth. They taught me like prisoners a lot of times are some of the highest IQ people in the population, or a percentage of. There's a higher
Yeah.
percentage of high IQ people in prison than the general population because they tend to have these like risk-taking personalities. They need their brains constantly stimulated. So, kind of just taught me not to judge them because they made some mistakes and they got caught for them. And in fact, when I even see it in the moving industry, some of the most successful moving company owners I know that are light years ahead of me were high school dropouts. They may have actually gotten in trouble at some point early on. A lot of
Hmm.
them struggle with addiction or did struggle with addiction, not currently if they're successful typically, but at some point in their young life, they had some of those issues, but they were able to channel it and they were able to apply it to more productive ventures like business or
Wow.
fitness. I know a few people that have gotten in some trouble, spent some time in jail, had some addiction issues that have cleaned everything up. They've got amazing families now. They're incredibly wealthy and they've built incredibly successful businesses and are in great physical shape. So, yeah, it's really interesting to see that. I think there's, everybody has their own story, everybody has their own past and traumas and life events that kind of mold who they are. So it's important not to judge a book by its cover and to be willing to give second chances to somebody who may have messed up at some point, but learned from it and was able to
Wow.
channel whatever that tendency was towards the greater good.
That's amazing. I love what you're doing with so Titan Retreats gathers with regularity all of, those that are in the industry that want to get better and level up their businesses, correct? You gather every year or
Yep.
multiple times a year?
Yeah, usually multiple times a year. We've historically done at least two events a year. We're having our second one this year in September, and we'll see what comes next after that. But we're probably going to go towards like a big annual conference once a year, and then maybe some smaller, more intimate group retreats at different destinations. That's kind of the model that we're leaning towards doing. But I mean, it just gets you in a room with people that share a very similar lifestyle and a lot of the same problems, that have a lot of good ideas that you don't otherwise get to talk to because they say as an entrepreneur, a CEO, it's lonely at the top, and it's sometimes hard to find people locally, whether that's your neighbors, your family, your community, that share the lifestyle that an entrepreneur shares, especially in an industry that you're in. There are networking groups with other business owners, but usually not a lot of people in your business industry that are going through the same struggles or have been through the same struggles, or will go through the same struggles, or that have the ideas that could apply to the nuances in whatever industry that you might be in. In my case, moving. So I think every time we host one of these events, I come back so energized because it's like my tribe. They're my people that we can just we can be who we are and we don't have to feel bad about it. I think a
I
lot of
love
times
it.
society thinks that if you're an entrepreneur, you're either broke and struggling, or you're rich and you have the life made. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, you could be both, or you could have been through all of it. And usually, most entrepreneurs go through all of it at some point. I mean, there's different cycles and different seasons that everybody encounters. And when you can get in a room with like-minded people and surround yourself with people that are at that next level or trying to get to that next level, then you tend to just by default get to that next level.
So people that are listening they have a moving company, they should be going to that culture so they can make connections, learn. You have a training platform that they can go through to level up to the next entrepreneurial venture. Those that are listening that are interested in potentially getting in the industry, they can go through your vetting process to see if your connection potentially is from a brand and franchise standpoint. Um, I love it. Oh, one thing I want to ask, were your parents house hackers? Like in real estate, were they, that term? where
Yeah,
that you
yeah, they've
buy a
always
house and then you like fix it up and then you sell it and flip? Because
Yeah,
something we share, we both
they've
moved it,
always kind of
moved a lot.
had their hand in some real estate stuff. At one point, my dad, before I was born, he owned I think it was like 32 units in a motel or something.
Wow.
But growing up, it's funny that you asked because I always say the reason I got into the moving industry and was just kind of drawn to it is because we moved like every 2 years. Because we had to
Yeah,
live
I
in a
was
house
thinking
for
house hacking or something.
yeah, we had to live in a house for 2 years to get the, capital gains tax
Yeah,
reasons and
there
all
you
that.
go.
I won't
Yeah.
get too into that, but like, that was how they explained it to us back then. And so we were just like constantly moving, and we'd move locally too, which was funny because, like they'd go for a run in the neighborhood and see an open house, and then that's how we spent a lot of Saturdays and Sunday afternoons. And so I used to hate it at the time, but my parents would be like, "Wouldn't it be funny if one day Wade owned a moving company?" And I
It's
guess they
amazing.
manifested that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's there's something to moving and what it can do to open up how we look at things, and I think has long term can have a very beneficial, um, let's say, be a catalyst to understand culture. We share that. Having to move, it changes the way you look at things. And Wade, I'd love to have you back on the show. There's so many things we didn't unpack or get into, so you're always welcome back on the show. I definitely want people to follow you. So, what your podcast was, what was it called again?
It's so unless you own a moving company or in the moving industry or thinking about getting into it, you may not find it as interesting as most of my audience, but it's the Grow Your Moving Company podcast.
And your book, Hometown Titan.
Hometown Titan. Yep. Yeah, and
That
that's
I've listened to, and I think anyone could really relate to that as far as building a culture in their hometown and developing a business. And you have some new books that you're working on.
Yeah, so the Hometown Titan I just published last October, so a little less than a year ago. And it's all about just building a local business that dominates your market. Whatever that is, doesn't necessarily have to be moving. I draw on a lot of my experience from moving and try to start every chapter with a story on, something that I went through and how it taught me a lesson that I get into in the chapter. But that's, it's kind of a general business book. But if you have a local business, especially because growing up, I saw that my friends who seemed to have the biggest houses and all the newest, nicest clothes and sports equipment, their parents were some sort of a local institution business owner. And that's ultimately what inspired me to write
Hmm.
that. And then just, modernized business practices that I employ today just from the lessons that I've learned. And then as far as books that I'm thinking about writing, I'm not actively working on anything right now, but one was what we mentioned earlier about the inside out of the moving industry. How the overall industry is broken and what can be done to fix it, and to also educate just consumers on how to identify the right moving company because you hire somebody who's coming in to handle your life's prized possessions and uproot you and put you into a new environment. While that can be a good growth experience, it can also be very traumatic for some. And going back to your point about the culture and the creativity that comes out of moving, similar to travel, which I recently learned or recently realized, I should say, traveling is different from vacationing. Vacationing is relaxing. Traveling can also be
Yep.
stressful, but it opens your mind up to how other cultures live and operate. And I think moving is kind of similar to that because it breaks your routine. I think a lot of times people just get in this repetitive motion. They keep this same routine and they start to get closed minded because they just create this vision of how the world works to them. But when you move, that routine breaks and it kind of changes your perspective sometimes on things and lets your brain, form some new connections. So, yeah, so we'll see if I find the bandwidth and the time to get that out soon. But it is something that I'm really interested about. And I've kind of started the research phase on how I would go about laying that one out. So stay tuned for it.
I love it. I love the concept. And one thing you said earlier in the show about how you believe the industry will change, and you were mentioning how, robots and these things could happen. I say that says vision. And if I'm in your industry, you're somebody I want to follow, I want to get connected with. And so thank you so much for coming on the Culture Matters podcast. Please, if you're listening to this, go subscribe to Wade's podcast by Hometown Titan. You will learn a lot from him. And please share this with a friend. We will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks, Wade.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.